It is now 100% officially confirmed that we are getting a sequel to Godzilla Kong: The New Empire, which is going to be the 6th major theatrical release set within Legendary Studios' Monsterverse. This confirmation comes at a time when the new empire is well and truly on its way to dethrone the worldwide box office collections of Kong Skull Island and take its place as the highest-grossing Monsterverse movie of all time. It is also the second biggest blockbuster of 2024 so far, which is why the news of its sequel does not surprise me at all. Back in 2014, when the first Godzilla movie came out, no one in their right frame of mind would have predicted that 10 years down the line, a cinematic universe built around giant oversized monsters and titans would be the hottest thing in pop culture, especially at a time when bigger franchises like Marvel, DC, and Star Wars are struggling to find their way. So, if you are a Monsterverse fan, you can be really proud because we have honestly come a long way further than anyone's prediction by a decent margin. And with the success of the new empire, we continue to travel even further on our journey to become the biggest cinematic universe of all time. Coming back to the announcement of the sequel, the absolute best part is that this gentleman called Dave Callaham is reported to have been locked by Legendary Studios, the scriptwriter for the sequel. Well, let me inform you that Mr. Callaham was the scriptwriter for MCU's Shang-Chi as well as the commercially and critically acclaimed Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Quite frankly, Across the Spider-Verse probably even makes the list of the all-time greatest science fiction comic book movies. So, after getting to know about Mr. Callaham's involvement, my expectations for Godzilla x Kong Part 2 has exponentially increased. I am pretty sure that the next Monsterverse movie is going to be much more serious and emotionally deep, which will be in stark contrast to the last two projects set within the franchise. This actually makes much more sense now because the director of GVK as well as the new empire, Mr. Adam Wingard himself, revealed just about a month ago in an interview with IGN that he wants his next movie to be much more emotional compared to his other two projects. He also revealed in the same interview that the next movie is going to be more focused on Godzilla, similar to what GVK as well as the new empire did with Kong's character. Whether you like it or not, you have to admit the fact that both Godzilla x Kong as well as GVK were Kong movies for all intents and purposes. To be more precise, the Big G had a screen time of exactly 8 minutes and 43 seconds throughout the entire movie, which is ridiculous considering the fact that he was marketed as one of the two main protagonists of the movie. But unlike a section of Godzilla fans, I am not going to take this too personally and blow things out of proportion. I believe the amount of screen time should never be considered as the standard for judging the portrayal of a certain character in a movie. The proper parameter should ideally be how you use the given amount of screen time to showcase and uplift your character. And so far as Adam Wingard is concerned, he has been able to portray our beloved King of the Monsters in the absolute best way possible in whatever little screen time he has had. The Big G looked like an absolute larger-than-life force of nature for every single second that he appears on the silver screen. In defense of Mr. Wingard, Godzilla at its core is essentially a giant atomic lizard driven by instinct. Focusing solely on him on screen all the time is not really feasible. So weaving a story around him without additional human characters is almost impossible, to be very honest. Coming back to Mr. Wingard's interview with IGN, the most interesting part was that he expressed interest in bringing out a similar kind of emotional resonance that Toho's Godzilla vs. Destoroyah movie offered with his next Monsterverse project. Although he does not explicitly confirm Destoroyah's introduction to the Monsterverse at any point during the interview, the fact that he specifically mentions Destoroyah speaks volumes about his future plans. Speaking from a purely personal standpoint, ever since the Oxygen Destroyer was introduced in King of the Monsters, I knew that it was just a matter of time before we eventually get introduced to arguably the most powerful kaiju ever created in history. For those who are new to the mythos of Godzilla and kaijus, let me brief you a little bit about the Oxygen Destroyer. It is basically a weapon of mass destruction invented by Dr. Serizawa with the intention to kill the Big G in the original 1954 Godzilla movie. It works by destroying oxygen molecules using a rare chemical compound called microoxygen. Pretty much everything on Earth, including Godzilla, has oxygen somewhere in its molecular structures. Destroying the oxygen molecules disturbs the atomic structure of any element, essentially causing the thing to melt. The Oxygen Destroyer still remains the only man-made weapon which was successfully able to neutralize Godzilla. Although the weapon did manage to get rid of the Big G, something terrifying was born from this, a demon beyond comprehension whose joy runs through death and slaughter, a destroyer of mass proportions. As a longtime fan of Godzilla, I was at the edge of my seat when I witnessed the oxygen destroyer being launched, not because it is the only weapon to have slain Godzilla in the past, but because it was responsible for giving birth to probably the most terrifying entity in cinema history. For those confused by my last statement, let me give you a little context of the whole thing. So, the effects of the use of the original oxygen destroyer showed up almost 40 years later in this movie called Godzilla vs. Destoroyah, which is in fact the exact same film Adam Wingard was referring to during his interview with IGN. When the weapon was first deployed in Tokyo Bay in 1954, it revived a colony of Precambrian crustaceans. Due to the prevailing toxic environment and the anaerobic conditions in the area, millions of these tiny poisonous creatures started to undergo mutations, eventually fusing into one single creature. As a result, after 4 long decades, the world had to witness the birth of arguably the most powerful kaiju imaginable, known as the Destoroyah. So in a way, Destoroyah is like the living symbolic representation of the oxygen destroyer, the one and only weapon that managed to kill the Big G. So Destoroyah isn't just your typical generic monster. He is literally the physical manifestation of mankind's hubris and want for destruction. Coming to the Monsterverse once again, the stage for the introduction for Destoroyah was well and truly set the moment Legendary Studios decided to introduce the oxygen destroyer in King of the Monsters. Why else would they introduce such an iconic fictional element like the oxygen destroyer and then 5 years down the line specifically mention about Destoroyah, the kaiju largely synonymous with that same weapon? As a matter of fact, considering the events that transpired at the end of Godzilla Kong the New Empire, introducing Destoroyah in the next movie actually makes perfect sense. We now have a situation where the Big G and Kong have Mothra, Shimo, and an entire army of Hollow Earth apes to support them. The only kaiju I can think of who stands a realistic chance of defeating this entire team all by himself is none other than Destoroyah. In fact, if Legendary Studios is smart enough, they can actually modify and retcon Destoroyah's origins in order to make this version of the character even more dark and terrifying in comparison to its Toho counterpart. If you remember, in King of the Monsters, Godzilla was not the only one to be hit by the oxygen destroyer. It hit Monster Zero, better known as King Ghidorah, as well, which gives rise to a very interesting possibility. We can have this version of Destoroyah as an amalgamation of molecular particles of both Godzilla as well as Ghidorah. In other words, Monsterverse Destoroyah would be like a mix of Godzilla and Ghidorah, the two most powerful titans, which would be an absolutely terrifying yet awesome sight to witness for fans. What do you think about the sequel to Godzilla x Kong, which is now officially confirmed? And do you think Destoroyah could be the antagonist for the movie? Let me know in the comments down below. So, that is all I have to share in this video. If you enjoyed watching, please do not forget to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.